Am I fortunate? No doubt. Am I blessed? Am I as privileged as you could possibly get just being born into this family? 100%. But that doesn't detract from my emotional state. This idea that just because you have things, you cannot have feelings and want to express these feelings, that drives me crazy.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik, and welcome to my breakdown. This is the place where we break things down so you don't have to.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you, because you know she knows a thing or two. So now she's gonna break down. It's a breakdown. She's gonna break it down.
Today we're going to be speaking to Oliver Hudson. You may know him as an actor. You also may know him as the sibling of Kate Hudson, which also makes him the child of Goldie Hawn, and his stepfather is Kurt Russell. Comes from a very interesting family. He's a very fascinating person, and he and Kate have a podcast called Sibling Revelry. So we're going to be talking about siblings, and we're going to be talking about love languages. We're going to be talking about some pretty radical therapy that has transformed his life. And we also talk about our siblings. It's a biggin'. It's a biggin'. But first, let's say hello to my Superman in a super suit, Jonathan Cohen.
Hi, Mayim. Finally getting our super suits on. We're not matching exactly, but we're pretty close.
It's Super Suit Day. For those of you who are listening, hello. And for those of you who are watching on my YouTube channel, Jonathan Cohen and I choose to be twinsies for every episode. And there was one day where we were kind of in a tiff, and I didn't tell him what I was wearing. And he saw what I was wearing, and then he went and changed. Like, that's how committed he is to us being twinsies. And today is Super Suit Jacket Day.
And for those people in audio who do not know what a supersuit is, usually it refers to a matching pant and jacket situation.
Like a training suit that like all the hipsters wear.
Like a tracksuit, which I call supersuits. And it's a big deal because I've won Mayim over after many years of her
thinking they're ridiculous. Well, mostly it's because I generally don't get dressed unless I need to. So anything like this that looks like adornment, it's just like, it's very, I don't know, it's very fancy for me.
Tell everyone what happened when we went to the Nike store one time and we were walking around the different outfits and I was suggesting things for you to try on, just as, you know, we got there, you were like, I'm not buying anything. There's no way I'm buying anything. I will never wear this. But then we were in the store and I was like, why don't we just like pretend it's a fitting? Let's just see what it might feel like on your body. What did you say?
No. The best part of our supersuit story is that I was teasing you about wearing them. And then when my kids saw you in one, they were like, yo, Jonathan's really cool. Check out that supersuit. It's like, that's it. It's over. So then you got them. You helped me choose for them supersuits. And now when Miles needs new clothing of this arena, I literally ask you, what should I get, Miles?
I trend really well with the, 12 to 15 demo in my clothing choices.
I'm sure it's not because you're a bit like a 12 to 15-year-old.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. Do we have any housekeeping, bookkeeping, Zamboniing to do?
Why don't we explain what love languages are for people who might not know, because it comes up later in the episode.
Okay. We'll kind of do it as like a word of the day, word of the day, word of the day, word of the day. So love languages is something that was talked about in a book that's called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, with over 12 million copies sold. It's been improving relationships for more than 25 years. And I'll be honest, I haven't read the book, but and I'm assuming I should, and we'll link to it just because we should. But the idea is that we as humans operate under kind of 5 basic categories of needs. And they're not necessarily needs. They're the ways that you communicate best. Love to someone else. Doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but it's kind of the easiest way to think about it, I've found. So you have a love language that you speak, but then you also have a love language that you understand. They're not always the same thing. For example, the love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. So words, acts, gifts, time, and touch. I'm sure you can already imagine that a lot of these, I'm sure that many people would argue it's cultural, but there also is a gendered aspect to some of these things. And that's not to say that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I'm going to just give an example. I love to give acts of service. I like to cook for people. I like to clean for people. I like to do things for people. But not everyone feels loved when you do things for them. So it's the way that I like to give love, but it may not be the way someone wants to receive it. And in addition, I'm not huge on people doing things for me. That's not necessarily my favorite way to receive love. So there's kind of two sides to it. So that's essentially what the love languages are that we're going to be talking about in a bit. And the episode's not about love languages. We're doing this as the phrase of the day or the word of the day because it does come up, and I think it's important to have a little bit of background. And we do talk about what our love languages are, except that no one asks me what mine are. The curious aspect of this episode.
I'm going to be quiet and not comment on that at all.
No, it's fine. I'm glad we know what yours and Oliver's are by the end of this episode.
Clearly, it's not introspection or question asking.
I do like physical touch. I talk about that a little bit. I like to give acts of service. I do like to give and receive physical touch. That's one that works both ways for me.
Also, it's really important just to be able to have clear communication, whether it's love languages or other types of communication. If you're communicating and it's not being received properly by the individual, it's not landing. You're going to...
Well, and also, I'll give one more example, since I clearly want to talk about my love languages, even though no one was really asking me. A lot of people think that women like gifts and flowers, and that I have found that that's true for almost every single woman I know. I'm just going to say it. It is not true for me. And I know my mother's listening thinking, that's because you don't deserve it. No, I mean, sometimes I think I don't deserve it, but everybody's different. So, you know, have I been with men who like getting flowers? No, hasn't been my experience. I'm sure there are men that like flowers. And some men like gifts and some men don't. But I'm just letting you know, letting everyone know, not a flowers person, not really a gifts person. And people are like, oh, well, she's rich. She can buy everything for herself. It's not because of that either.
Can I have my love language be receiving super suits?
Yes, I'll buy you a super suit. I'm going to tell people about Oliver Hudson right now. Oliver Hudson most recently starred opposite Jenna Fisher in Splitting Up Together. He has starred opposite David Spade and Patrick Warburton in Rules of Engagement, which was produced by Adam Sandler. He's had recurring roles on a bunch of shows, and his Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson and Daddy Issues with Joe Buck and Oliver Hudson are two of the most popular and talked about podcasts. He has other credits. He was in Medal of Honor, a bunch of things. And it's really exciting to welcome Oliver Hudson.
Break it down.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
We're excited to talk to you. So there's many things that I'd like to ask you. For many reasons. And, you know, one of the things that I'm very interested to hear from you is sort of like why you choose to talk about the things you talk about. Because obviously Jonathan and I have, you know, started a podcast about mental health. So we choose to kind of like tell all of our things and, you know, kind of like muddle through all of our mess, you know, with guests who share with us whatever they muddle through.
I actually think the mental health topic is a complete foil. And it just allows us to talk about anything because you can really ladder it all back.
Yes. As our resident scientist, I will say it does all ladder back. But tell us a little bit about your podcast and sort of how you decided to start it and why, and sort of what those decisions are like about what to talk about.
Yeah, with Sibling Revelry, you know, my sister and I had never worked together on anything. We had an interesting, tumultuous upbringing. We were not friends for a long time. We existed in each other's orbits, but we were not connected in any way. I didn't feel like I even had the emotional capacity to be a brother for her just because I was dealing with my own shit, you know, with my dad and my stepdad and my mom, you know, being a movie star and being away. I retreated into a bit of a shell. And only after sort of college and once I got a little bit older were we able to connect and really get to know each other the way that we should. And, cut to, we wanted to do something together. And the podcast medium was blowing up, and it was just a really easy way to sort of be in the same room and talk about our feelings and really explore the idea of the sibling relationship, because it's an extremely important one, and one that I think is underexplored. We are with our siblings more than we are with our parents. I mean, we commiserate with our siblings more than we do with anybody else. There's a connection there that can run deep and can also be extremely frayed. And sometimes it's worse than having no real relationship with your parents. I mean, that sibling bond is important. You have to lean on each other in hard times, and when it's not there, it can get rough. And we just wanted to get into that world. And in getting into that world, Katie and I were able to sort of even get to know each other a little bit better. And it's funny because I am able to be more honest with her and how I feel about her when I've got this stupid microphone in front of my mouth.
I totally get it.
Isn't that weird?
No,
it's
totally
so
get
strange.
it. It is very strange, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, my vulnerability level goes up, when I've got this in front of my face and I'm able to say, well, yeah, I mean, this is the way that you have made me feel in the past, or, this is how I feel about you now. So it's been really great for us.
Jonathan and I talked a bit about sort of how to approach, different aspects of a conversation with you because...
By the way, I'm an open book.
I know. But there's a lot about your life that's been very public because, you grew up in a house with fame. And I'm very interested in that because, I'm a public person and I'm raising kids and it's like very strange and they don't really watch me on TV, which I don't really want them to, but I don't know if they should because like their perception of the world is very strange because they finally realized like, oh, you're kind of like a famous person and it's weird. Anyway, so I was thinking about that. And also, so much of your family life has been exposed in ways that many people's lives are not exposed, and the things that happened in your family, and having a mixed family, a blended family, and having a stepdad, who also is a very prominent person and, kind of all those dynamics. These are things, that in different ways happen to a lot of people, meaning there are a lot of blended families. There are a lot of cases of bio parents not being around, or, some people are adopted by a step parent and some are not, all this stuff. But you've kind of had to live it out publicly. But for people who kind of don't know, can you just give us, like the 2-minute thumbnail sketch of kind of, what it was like growing up and sort of also the ages you and your sister were, when a lot of these changes happened?
My parents divorced when I was about 5. Kate was 3, 4 and 2, 5 and 3. If people don't know, my mother is Goldie Hawn and my stepdad is Kurt Russell. There was a moment of about 2 years where mom was dating and it was just us. And then Kurt came into our lives and changed everything, honestly. But it was not easy. I mean, it definitely was not an easy thing, especially being in the public eye. It was an unconscious situation because I wasn't old enough to understand it. But I do remember not liking when people would approach my mother.
Yep, that's my kids. Yeah.
Oh God, it would drive me crazy. We're at dinner and these people are coming up and I'm like, just get the fuck away. Please leave us alone. I mean, that was my internals.
And also for people who may be listening who don't know, your mother was extremely famous, like
exactly right.
And also, it's not just like, oh, you think like, oh, influencers and like, oh, that she was and is. I mean, she's a movie star, and being a movie star is very different than being a TV star. So we're talking also about even before social media, before all these things, we're talking about like the highest level, literally, of notoriety at a time when there were no barriers.
And that's when the paparazzi too they had 7 or 8 people to hit up. So they knew where you were. I mean, I remember every time we would go to an airport, right? We would get off the airplane and everything seemed to be normal. And then out of nowhere,
Yep.
you had 15 photographers jump out in front of you. Ka-ka, ka-ka, ka-ka.
The flight attendants used to call media services to let them know who was on the plane. And that's how people found out.
I will say, though, that within the four walls, I'm jumping ahead, but within, when Kurt came into our life, it was incredible. I mean, he made me the man that I am today. No doubt about it. We went to Colorado, and that changed my life as well. Just learning independence, not being so attached to my mother, being okay, being alone, knowing how to get myself out of situations where normally I wouldn't have been able to, and just nature. Being in nature really soothed me and grounded me, and Kurt is the one who brought me to that place. But, we lived a normal life within our four walls. It sounds crazy, but it's just the way it was. I mean,
And he didn't have children, correct? Kurt did not have children?
Kurt did. Kurt had one kid, Boston, who's my stepbrother.
Okay, got it. So did y'all grow up together?
Yes, we all grew up together. He had his mother, and there was sort of a back and forth there, and then at the same time, Kurt was dealing with my dad and how that all sort of was playing out. And actually, there's a story, and it's a moment that I'll never forget. There was a time when Dad was supposed to pick us up. We had our little suitcases. He came to the house. For whatever reason, shit blew up. He left. And it was that after-school special moment of like, it's your fault, Mom. It's all your fault. And then Kurt took us aside, and he said, okay, here's the thing. No matter what happens with your mother and I will be here for you. If we leave each other tomorrow, I am going to be the man in your life forever. I don't want you to call me Kurt. I don't want you to call me Dad, because I'm not your dad. We got to figure out a name. And that's how we came up with Pa. So we call him Pa. That's what we call him. It was tough, but I am who I am because of all of it now. And I've been in therapy for 20 years. I went to a place called the Hoffman Institute, which was the most influential, amazing, life-changing experience for me when we're talking about sort of mental health. Honestly, I'm dealing with it right now. I'm in a bit of a low spot, and I don't quite know why. I'm going off of my Lexapro. I was on 20 milligrams, and I'm weaning off, and now I'm at 2.5. I don't know if that's contributing to it. So I ebb and I flow, and I try to just go with it. And
so, yeah, if we can unpack that a little bit. So you said you've been in therapy for 20 years. And when was the Hoffman Institute, and can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
that was 2 years ago. And I was just in this place of repeating patterns, repeating these patterns that I just could not get out of. I didn't like myself. I didn't like that I was doing some of these things that I was doing and wasn't able to stop them necessarily. I didn't feel in control. And I had a friend who went and heard about it. I said, you know what, I'm going. And I just, made the appointment and went. And that was 2 years ago. And it was really...
Do you stay there?
Yeah, you stay there for 7 days. There's one in Napa. That's St. Helena. And, your phone goes away. All vices go away. Everything. I mean, no books, no music, you're not supposed to run or do yoga or anything.
Jonathan, are you taking notes and packing your bag? We're sending you there.
I have my notebook.
The idea is that even if you're on the floor doing downward dog, you are still masking something. You know what I mean? They want to sort of strip you. And the whole concept is just the patterns. It's the repeating of patterns from your childhood.
You don't have to answer this. Did you have a thing you put down? Did you have a substance you put down?
I was never into, I drank or I smoked my weed or whatever.
Sure.
But no, I didn't. There was nothing there for that. It was, you could smoke cigarettes. You're allowed to do that, I guess, over there, But, yeah, no, I didn't have to put anything down like that. It wasn't, that part wasn't that difficult for me, but it took a minute. It took a minute to get into sort of, to really break free from myself. I was so wrapped up in my image in a way and what people are going to think about me. And some of the things that you do there require like the ultimate vulnerability and just letting go. And I finally had my moment, and it was just gnarly. I mean, it was really a gnarly moment for me. And from that moment on, I was able to really experience this process in its fullest.
I'm just curious, like, is it therapy based? It's talk therapy? Are you all silent? Do you meditate? Like,
It's like a mashing of all of it. I mean, I think the foundation of it is sort of cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what it felt like to me. But the whole concept is sort of this idea that you have taken on these patterns from your parents, and now you are living these patterns that you have sort of adopted. And it's really getting into your life and getting into your childhood and getting into your parents and understanding where you came from and why you do the things that you do. And then ultimately having the most complete forgiveness and true deep compassion for your parents, no matter how much they screwed you up. Because 9 times out of 10, they were going through situations themselves.
Sure, hurt people hurt.
Yeah. So yes, it's that. There was forms of meditation. There was guided meditation. There was, sort of primal therapy in a weird way. It was like 30-something people, 38, 40 people.
Did you know them, or they're just strangers?
No, it's
That's so weird.
It's so weird. It's so weird. Like I don't want to give too much away because you're not supposed to in case people want to go.
I'm trying to be delicate about it, yeah.
No. But I want to tell you all about it. But there was one, I will say this, there's one exercise on like the second day where they've got a pillow and you've got a wiffle ball bat.
No.
And that's where I had my breakthrough, because I'm like, what the hell is this? I look like a fool. What am I doing? And I couldn't get out of my head. And everyone is in there like, yeah, and I'm like looking at these people and passing the ultimate judgment on them. Like, these people are so crazy. And then I decided to do it my way. Okay. So and that was a lesson on its own, right? I wasn't going to do it the way that everyone else is doing it. I got quiet while everyone was crazy. I went deep into my soul. I went into a place of my mother, how amazing she is, but also how she wasn't there at times. And I just slowly started to feel it and drop into that place. And then I was able to fully express myself physically and emotionally and totally lost my shit.
How long did that last with the wiffle ball bat?
Oh God, like 15, 20 minutes or something like that.
No, that's a long time. I couldn't do that. I'm proud of you. I don't want that.
But that stuff is stuck in us. And I was wondering, Oliver, were you shocked at the emotion that came up, and were you like, holy shit, I've been holding all of that? And
so much. I can't even tell you. I had to leave actually once we were done and continue to just lose it on my own. And I was sobbing and heaving and it was crazy. I mean, it was really, really crazy. And you form a real bond with these people because everyone is going through their own stuff, and you're discovering love on a different level. I know it sounds a little crazy, but when you're able to be that open and raw with people, you can accept love and give love much easier. And that's the biggest thing that I got out of Hoffman. With my wife, with my mom, with my parents, with my sister, I am able to sort of even receive their love more. I would deflect compliments, deflect when people love me. And I would also not be able to tell my wife or my mom how much I love them and what they mean to me because it was too scary for me.
Because when we're carrying around that level of emotion, we're protecting ourselves from feeling it. We're disconnected from the fact that it exists. So the amount of energy we have to spend deflecting and protecting ourselves, we can't really engage fully emotionally with so many people. Mayim's looking at me, just shaking her head.
No,
yeah.
I'm not having it.
You also store so much of that emotion within your body.
Oh, do
physically.
you? Tell us, Oliver.
That comment is at me.
That's for Jonathan.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by BetterHelp Online Therapy.
Whether you're struggling with anxiety or depression, need help with relationships, or maybe you're having difficulty meeting your goals, online therapy might be just what you need. BetterHelp helps you assess your needs to match you with a professional, licensed therapist. You can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. This is not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. And these therapists have a broad range of expertise that may not be locally available in your area. You can schedule weekly video, phone, or even live chat sessions with your therapist. Log into your account anytime and send a message. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great matches. It's easy and free to change counselors if needed. It is more convenient and more affordable than in-person therapy, and financial aid is available.
Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/break. That's betterhelp.com/break. Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Hooked on Phonics.
If you were around in the 90s, you remember Hooked on Phonics commercials. It's a brand you grew up with, or maybe you even used it to learn how to read. I sure remember hearing those commercials. 35 years later, Hooked on Phonics is still the leader in teaching children to read, and something I mention to parents that I know who are interested in supporting their child's path to becoming a reader. I mean, Hooked on Phonics is like, it's a new way of learning to read that they literally figured out, and now everybody seems to use it. I sent it to my friend Emu for his son. Hooked on Phonics is a learn-to-read curriculum that uniquely combines an amazing app with hands-on learning materials shipped to your home every month. And with Hooked on Phonics, you get unlimited access to their powerful reading app along with workbooks and hands-on practice to reinforce the skills that children build with the app. And you get storybooks, specifically written to build your child's confidence, and discussion questions to increase reading comprehension. Lessons take just 20 minutes or less, which is fantastic, and the curriculum is guaranteed to help your child learn to read.
Give your child the confidence that reading brings with Hooked on Phonics. Visit hookedonphonics.com/breakdown and receive your first month for just $1. That's Hooked on Phonics, PHONICS.com/breakdown to get your first month of Hooked on Phonics for just $1. hookedonphonics.com/breakdown.
You had this experience of like, well, you know, something that, like I said, I think of in my own kids, and I'm not your mom. But, you know, just thinking about that level of kind of like intrusiveness. And I remember my younger son in particular, like he didn't even like if people came up to me because it felt like I was his, you know, especially when he was little. And he was a super late talker. So he didn't have also like the words to get into it. He hated when I was in hair and makeup. When I had to do red carpets, he hated it. And when he was a baby, he wouldn't hold me. Like he wanted me to take my makeup off. He would say, "No clown, no clown." Which, you know, doesn't feel great either. But he would say, "No clown." And
You're
so
like, this clown pays for your education, kid.
No, but like, no, this is when he was very tiny. But so I would, you know, and I don't feel like that's my kid telling me what to do. But like, yeah, I would come home, I would, you know, take my makeup down and like shake my hair out a little bit and just look like shitty mom again. And then, you know, that's how he knew me because I was home with them also just as, you know, shitty looking mom for the first years of their life. But then I'm thinking about what it must have been like then to grow up and have then your sister like have this career, because I just think of what I have a brother 4 years older than me. And by the time I was on Blossom, this show that I did when I was a teenager, he had already moved out. You know, he was, you know, I started acting. I was technically a late bloomer. He was in high school when I started acting and had a very active and interesting social life. And he was academically like the best. And he was like an amazing artist. And like, I always saw him as like the celebrity of the house, you know, but then you know, I obviously became this public person. And so, you know, a lot of people assume like, oh, that must have been so hard on him. And I think like, well, he was out of the house, but even still, I'm wondering what it was like for you, because it's not just that you had like a sibling who became, you know, this kind of like larger than life persona. it's like, I mean, I'm maybe completely just like projecting and thinking, but you must, and you are a person and a performer and a talented, fabulous person in your own right, but especially to be surrounded by these women who are like,
Oh, yeah.
like that's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I just imagine like, it might have felt like you're like this island of like you keep like kind of losing people, you know, because both your mom and Kurt and like, you know, it's like everyone had this elaborate outside world of engagement and interest and adventure and also like, you know, praise and money and fame and, you know, what, like, can you articulate that?
You're spot on. I mean, that was, I still work through that. You know what I mean?
I'm working through it. I'm not even part of your family. Like,
Yeah.
I'm having to go
I
to
know.
therapy to deal with what it's like to be a Hudson.
Well, just going back to even the first thing which you're talking about, or that you talked about with your son, and how he wants you to take your makeup
Right.
off and just be shitty mom. You know, I have so many memories of that as well. You know, I didn't love when she was not with me. I thought that people were taking her away from me.
Yeah.
That's what it was. You know, I was like, this is my mother, and you are taking her energy away from me. And then I have one story that still freaks me out to this day. It's like a horror film, not for me, contextually, but I was like a kid, and her stand-in looked just like her, or her stunt person. So on this particular movie, it's called Protocol. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I would go to set because we were on set with her all the time, and we grew up on sets. We were tutored, and that she took us wherever she went for the most part, you know. But this one movie, her stunt person or as her stand-in, I'm not sure, looked exactly like her, and I would go up and hug her legs and look up and be like, "Oh shit!"
Oh,
I mean, this was
that is like a horror
I can
film.
It
Yeah.
was traumatizing. And then unpacking what you just said about my sister and my family and the fame that they have. I mean, this is real. I mean, this is extremely real for me, even though in my own right, I'm a success. There's no doubt about that. But as far as, you know, again, context,
Yeah.
looking at my family, I'm the black sheep, you know, I'm like trying to sort of be something for them, or I need to be perceived as on their level or whatever it is, but there's definitely jealousy inside of me. There's no doubt about that. There's envy, and then that can lead to sort of just me being down on myself.
Right.
And this is a lot that I've definitely worked on. And of course with my sister, but even my brother, Wyatt, you know, Wyatt was a hockey player, and he's one of my best friends. He's 10 years younger than me. He is just one of the great human beings of all time. And I've expressed this to him even because I'm very open about it. But, you know, he just immediately, boom, hits the acting world and just takes off. He's at Sundance for 2 movies. He's doing this, he's doing that. Now he's Captain America, and, you know, everyone loves him, and he's an incredible actor and working with amazing directors. And I have this thing that just bubbles up inside of me. And it's not an easy thing to wrestle with. So yeah, it was tough. And honestly, it led to a major breakdown for me in my mid-20s.
So what this might look like, and I do know you've spoken about anxiety, you've spoken about depression, which honestly there's many aspects, you know, I think of your story that many of us could see. I'm also going to guess like a tremendous amount of you know, self-criticism and kind of, you know, I mean, for me, what would happen would be an obsessive rumination over what is it about them? Am I enough? I mean, like, basically, like you, I don't mean to make it worse, but you grew up in a giant ego challenge, meaning, what are you worth? Who gets the most attention? Is there enough to go around? And what's left over for Oliver?
Right. 100% self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Because there was absolutely no pressure. There was no expectation. There was no, oh, you need to be. Totally self-inflicted.
Okay, self-inflicted, yes, but also just organic. Like,
Yeah.
That's like, how could that not happen, and especially, to be a teenager, like there's so much to that. I mean,
But let me ask you a question. Do you think it's circumstantial, though? Meaning, because of how I grew up and because of my just body chemistry, I am more susceptible to feeling this way, whereas my brother or
Right.
Kate doesn't really have that. I mean, I'm the one who,
Yeah, I think that, when we talk about what causes things and how we get things, yeah, it's a super duper combination of some genetic predisposition, and we're all different and beautiful. We're all the colors of the rainbow.
It's a self-esteem too. It's like when my dad left and I needed that male in my life, and then Kurt came in, but my dad then sort of was there for a minute and then completely disappeared. I think that obviously had played with my self-esteem, not socially, strangely, but in my career.
It's funny because I think about I'm divorced, and we happily co-parent. We've been divorced, gosh, for almost a decade, I guess. Yeah. And I always think about, like, what's it like, if he meets people, not even necessarily in a dating situation, but just like that moment when people find out that his ex-wife is me. So I think about your dad, and like the moment that like you find out that your ex-wife is with Kurt Russell, because also for people who may not, like, he was a very big deal. Like he is a very big deal, but I'm saying like they're one of also those like Hollywood power couples that like everyone looks to, like it's a very like iconic, Hollywood relationship. So I also think about just like the dynamics of all of it. And I think about it for me too. Like I went on Bumble once, it was weird. But I think about that, like there's a point when people realize like, oh my God, you're that person. And then, yeah, I think, I have dated, in the years since I've been divorced. And yeah, like when people are like, oh, I'd like to set you up with someone, he has 2 kids in their teens. And I'm like, but I'm on the Big Bang Theory and their children, like, I just like, it's so weird to me. And it's just one of the things that as divorced humans, we all have to deal with.
No, but you make a great point.
I think many people might sort of listen to this or already be like, this is a weird Hollywood, elitist first world conversation. And as I'll talk about, in our conclusion also, what you and I are talking about is a very specific circumstance that highlights an incredibly universal human experience. And that is one of ego. That's one of where do you fit in your family? And that's true even if you don't have a sibling. And it's one of, is there enough to go around? And that notion of scarcity is what leads many people to be anorexic, either with food, with sex, with love, with money. That scarcity mindset, or the fear of scarcity, which again can be completely, like you said, generated by our own chemistry, our own experience, our own interpretation, our own perception. That's universal. So while it is fascinating to talk about specifically your family, like these are things, they happen in every family.
But it's also very universal to say, how do those first traumas, first wounds impact us? A father leaving, like that sticks with us.
It's funny you say that because I've had this issue recently with, as someone who is a celebrity or someone, who seemingly has everything, okay?
I mean, you got a strong jawline. We're very jealous of your jawline.
God, anyone who's listening on audio and not seeing the video right now, you got to pop over to the YouTube channel.
He's got beautiful eyes. He's got a big head of hair. He's got broad shoulders.
Oh, now he's showing off. He took the hat off.
But what I'm saying is that we're not allowed to have problems.
Right.
Again, I've seen comments and stuff. Oh, who are you to say this? And how could you feel this because you grew up like this and you're a celebrity or you have this? I'm like, look, am I fortunate? No doubt. Am I blessed? Am I as privileged as you could possibly get just being born into this family? 100%. But that doesn't detract from my emotional state. I can still have hundreds of millions of dollars and be this and have houses and be lucky and still be totally fucked up. Not that I'm those things, but this idea that just because you have things, you cannot have feelings and want to express these feelings, that drives me crazy.
I just want to speak to that also because I do think it's important to acknowledge that while we do have feelings, people who otherwise seem to have it all or other, I do want to acknowledge that we also have ability to get help in ways that people often do not.
Yes.
And I think that's very important to acknowledge. And that's sort of literally why Jonathan and I started this podcast, is we believe that mental health and information about yourself is a human right. It's not something for the elite. It's not something for people who have the right insurance or whose carrier is, So I just want to say that also, that I think we all would acknowledge that the level that we're talking about is such that we are human and we have all the same feeling. Mental health does not discriminate, but the fact that you have the ability, let's say, to go to the Hoffman Institute, or that we have the ability to have, experimental therapies and alternative things, and go to shamans, or, get medication, or even have access to a therapist, is something that most people do not have access to.
Great point. I'm honestly glad that you brought that up, because that sort of plays into sort of how I reconciled with my dad as well, because his dad left him when he was 5 years old, literally in the middle of the night. He didn't have the opportunity, the resources, or even the toolbox to live the life that he probably could have. So who knows what would have happened, if he was afforded those resources.
Right.
So yes.
And he left at that same time in your life? Was that also, so it's interesting how those patterns are like literally almost verbatim.
I mean, he divorced mom when I was 5, but he actually it was good till I was like 12 or so, and then it just took a hard right turn. I don't know what happened.
About siblings, you were talking about how you're more, and Mayim immediately shakes her head, but he brought it up at the beginning of the interview. Mayim and I both have complicated relationships with our siblings. And so at the podcast interview, she was like, we're not talking about siblings. We're not going there. And I'm like, how are we having him on and we're not going to talk about siblings?
I can't wait.
No, I think that, everyone these days, who has an Instagram page and a public persona, which, my brother's not a public person, but he is a person who exists. So I try and be very delicate, when I talk about him, because he has a life and he has an identity. But what I will say about both Jonathan and my relationship, Jonathan has a brother and a sister. He's the baby, and I have a brother. I'm the baby. What I will say, for very different reasons, is that Jonathan and I both have a limited ability to have communication with our siblings. And I would say a limited ability maybe to communicate the way that we thought we would when we were kids. Is that safe to say, Jonathan?
Yes. I'm shaking my head sort of like in a bobbly yes and no.
Limited ability, I mean, is like actual, like just an emotional limited ability, physical? I mean, what is that? How do you?
Yeah, for me, it's a conversation that is not open. Because of his choice, meaning I don't have access to a lot of information about really, and it's been like that, since I'm about 19. So I've had a very, very different kind of life, as, someone who was very, very close to my sibling, and, have lived essentially as an only child, since I'm 19. Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit about your situation, or?
Yeah, I have unlimited access to my brother, but he has not the full capacity. He was injured severely and was left with a traumatic brain injury.
When they were both teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah. When he was 17, I was 14, and he was the guy I looked up to. He was like just super athletic and sort of everything that I saw. I was like, I just want to be that. Whatever he's doing, I want to do. And then he was left with the prognosis for him was actually that he would never walk, talk, or recognize family again. He would be living as a vegetable. And he is honestly, he's a miracle, because he downhill skis and
he recognizes all of you.
He recognizes us, and, he has language impairment and he has memory impairment and he still has physical impairment.
But he is a miracle. He's a miracle.
But he's, he did 25 years of rehab. He's the hardest working guy you've ever met in your entire life. He's also the most optimistic guy you've ever met in your life.
Yeah. Anyway, so we both have very complicated relationships with our siblings. So doing this podcast is the closest that Jonathan and I get to working out, honestly, a lot of our own, family complexity. So I think that's also why it's kind of exciting to talk to you, because you're actively engaging in a way that I mean, honestly, I think both of us wish that we could, you know. I mean, my brother and I would do, I'm sure, an amazing podcast. Just never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you and your brother, I mean, that's a podcast I would listen to.
I mean, we're talking about having my brother on, but when you were talking about your sister and starting to work together, you said you could sort of open up to her and sort of like say how she made you feel at a certain time. I was thinking about like my brother, you know, we fought like crazy. We had, you know, I was a tiny little runt and he was like, just had a lot of anger issues. And so that ended up not great for me in many ways. And so, you know, over the years, we've had to like try to reconcile it. But I was wondering if you would sort of maybe get more specific about, you know, times where you sort of were working out issues with Kate and, you know, if you want to go there or not.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the thing is, Katie was always and still is just a very strong woman. I was never a protector because she just didn't need protecting. And honestly, actually, that's not fair. That's not fair. She probably did. I just don't think that I could do it. I was ready to do it or could do it, you know? It was just, I couldn't love her the way that I probably should have wanted to back then for whatever reason. And she needed me. That's the part that makes me sad, especially when we were kids. I was the man, even though I was a boy, but I was the male figure in her life that she needed. And she expressed that through her actions, wanting to be in my room, just wanting to be near me. And I would just, you know, push her away.
Yeah, we don't appreciate that when y'all do that.
My brother used to say that I breathed too loud when I was around him. And so he would say, if you breathe more quietly, you can hang out with me.
That's so funny. You know, what's funny is I have 2 kids. I have 3 kids. So I have 2 boys and my little girl. And now whenever my boys give her crap, I go into this like psychological mode of this unconscious insanity of like, don't you dare to her. It's like I'm yelling at myself as a 7-year-old boy.
How's that working for you,
I mean?
Oliver? How's it working for you?
This is why I'm in therapy, you know, for so many reasons.
But those are the patterns, because often we talk about patterns and it's not clear to the audience. It's like, what are you talking about patterns if you've never sort of uncovered that, you know, something from so long ago presents in a way that you're like, we don't even realize why we're motivated to be so protective. So it's really important to understand those things.
Yeah, and then it's also just understanding that Katie and I are 2 just different people. I mean, there's the center, there's the guts of us that are the same. You know what I mean? There's humor, there's sort of the way that we look at life, but we raise our kids totally differently. We have different personalities. She has to sort of accept me and I accept her. There are moments where it gets contentious. There's no doubt. I had a 6-week period where we were in a bit of a tiff, you know? And that just happens. I think it's just communication though. It's as long as we can talk about it and tell each other why we're not liking each other in that moment, then we're okay.
Also, I have a question, and I would ask this even if your sister wasn't, you know, who she is. And I'm sure this is something she's spoken about, but she's also done her own work. Meaning you are two people who have, you know, you're different people and, you know, different ways to go about it, but that's also an important piece here is that you have a partner in her.
Well, we have the same therapist. We literally have the same therapist. Now, check this out. Check this out. Not only did Katie and I have the same therapist, my mother, me, Wyatt,
but
everyone.
It wasn't like an accident. You didn't like look in the phone book. Like you
No.
all, that's amazing. Okay. But in any event, even if you didn't have the same therapist, which is adorable, the fact that you are speaking with someone who has a vocabulary for talking about these things, connecting with these things, that's a huge important part because I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions of people who are like, my whatever won't speak to me, or like, I can't talk to him without wanting to kill him. You know, what you're dealing with is you've both done a lot of work separately and you choose to also do a certain amount of work together.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, without a doubt, you know, and a lot of it too is me. It's just me being vulnerable and being able to tell Kate what I feel and
Which for men is not, and for men that doesn't come as naturally, especially in our culture. So yeah,
It does not. It really doesn't. And Kate's tough. I don't want her to like kill me. So if I'm like, Kate, I really don't like the way that you did this, and I don't want her to be like, God damn it, and I'm like, oh God, I just don't want to rock the boat.
is
you know
she
what I mean?
is she like your mom or your dad or Kurt? Like, who are you both like most?
That's a good question. What's funny is Kurt being the non-bio
Yeah.
parent, we're so much like him.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I find myself, some speech patterns, the way that I think, the way that I parent, a lot of it is from Kurt.
And is she more like your mom, would you say?
Yeah, but she's like my mom, but she's
Yeah.
like Kurt too. Kate's
Yeah.
tough, man.
Yeah.
Kate is tough with her kids too. Like she's much more strict than I am to the point where I'm like, Kate, just relax. Let them go do this. They're boys. Let them fall.
Right.
Let them get hurt. Everything's gonna work out.
Yeah.
But she can be tough.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Storyworth.
If there's ever been a year to make the dads in your life feel loved and appreciated on Father's Day, it is this one. Not sure what to do for a Father's Day gift? Well, we just helped you find the perfect gift. It is Storyworth. It's an online service that helps your dad, your grandfather, your father-in-law, any father figure in your life share stories through thought-provoking questions about their memories and personal thoughts. It's a fun way to engage with them, especially if you can't be together in person. Every week, Storyworth emails the dad of your choice a different story prompt, questions you never thought to ask, like, what's your favorite story about your father? What things are you proudest of in life? Storyworth has helped numerous families learn about each other in profound and special ways. Their testimonials will move you to tears. In fact, Storyworth has already created a powerful experience for me because I have signed up for Storyworth and I have started this project for my ex-husband, because that's just the kind of gal I am. There's no shortage of surprises when reading the weekly stories, and they make your family feel close even if you can't be together. After 1 year, Storyworth compiles all the stories, including photos, into a beautiful keepsake book that is shipped for free. Give your dad the most meaningful gift this Father's Day with Storyworth.
Get started right away with no shipping required by going to storyworth.com/breakdown. You'll get $10 off your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/breakdown for $10 off.
I was just thinking of that. There's a John Mulaney joke, and it's definitely true, I think, as a Jewish joke, but it works as a female joke also. He's like, the thing about dating a Jewish woman is you never need to wonder what they're thinking because they tell you. It's like, I never don't know what she walks in the room and she's like, this happened, that happened, this hurts, this person died. Like, I feel angry. I'm going away. Like, yeah.
That's my mother. My mom, when you get on the phone with my mom, there is no hello.
Right.
It's like I get on the phone, I'm like, I call mom and she picks it up. She goes, so we're here at the desert and we just had some lunch and I shot a 45. I'm like, literally not even a hello. And that's not even an exaggeration at all. It's right into what I'm doing.
I think it's not only true of Jewish women, although it works very well for John Mulaney because it's a whole joke about what it's like to date a Jewish person. But I think that is true. Again, super gendered, conversation, super culturally, specific conversation. But there also is a biology, to women having a different kind of social structuring, a different kind of linguistic structuring. Like, that's science and it's real. And also, I really feel for all the men out there. This might be unpopular with certain kinds of women, but I do feel for the men out there because we have a culture that's now demanding that you be very present. We want you like super involved. We want you to make the lunch, but also make it the way I tell you to for the kids, like be involved, but be involved the way I want you to be. And then also be really emotional. Only want to have sex when I want to have sex. Don't be upset if I don't want to have sex. Like, it's a very specific role for men.
Also express all of your emotions, but don't insult me.
Hold on.
Don't say anything negative about me necessarily.
Right.
Or if when you do express your emotions, make sure you do it in a way that's appropriate.
Right. Express all of your emotions, but only the ones that are positive and reflect positively on me.
Exactly.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I feel for the men out there because it's true. Like, my dad, did I ever see my father make a meal? No. And my parents were together for 53 years. I never saw him go to the supermarket. Like, he never did laundry. Like, it wasn't even a thing. And honestly, it worked for them. But like men these days, you have to do all the things, but also still do all the man thing. Like, it's a lot. And it's a lot for women too, because we're also asked to work, but also still take care of the children and clean the house and be available for sex also.
Yes. Well, everyone's screwed. It's just impossible. But you know what? The five love languages. You know that book?
What's your love language, Oliver?
My love language is physical touch for sure, and
Okay.
without a doubt.
Oh, wait, hold on. We're going to go around the room. Jonathan, what's your love language? Oliver, what are the choices? Physical touch.
Yeah, what are the choices? I forget now. I did it a while ago.
Yeah, there's physical touch, there's acts of service, there's quality time.
I love when someone helps me out and does something.
Oh, so you want someone else's love language to be acts of service.
So acts of service.
Acts of service is phenomenal. I'm like, yo, help out. I have that crossed. I'm like, oh, if it's helpful for me to get help, I'll like try to find out what that person needs, and I'll be like, I can do that for you. No problem. And that should make you super happy because like, look how much I'm doing.
Right, but Jonathan, I don't give a shit about that. I need you to touch me. So you can do all those acts of service for me, but I don't care. Just rub my back, man.
Right. So, and this is one of my favorite things about love languages and also just human relationships in general. When you expect that the other person will love you the way you want to be loved is where most relationships break down. Because wanting the other person to do what you want is actually called an extreme form of narcissism. Love me the way I love. So like, I'm going to bring you flowers, therefore you must bring me flowers. That actually that's my favorite example. Like women who are like, I want flowers, right? Okay, but he doesn't want flowers. He wants whatever he wants, right?
Right. Well, that's the sacrifice that you kind of have to make. Like my love language is physical touch.
Correct.
Erin does not, it's literally the last on her list.
What does she want?
Acts of service.
She wants service, right?
If I'm vacuuming or if I'm doing the dishes or if I'm cleaning, I'm getting laid. There's just no doubt about it. It literally turns her on. I mean, she's like, oh my God, you know, whereas if she does that for me, it's like, oh, okay, cool.
I guess the house is clean. Who cares?
But anyway, we try to live by that a little bit and it kind of works.
Yeah, I like the love languages.
It's important to just get the lines clear. Otherwise, you're just thinking you're doing all this effort and not understanding why it's not resonating with the other person.
It's totally fine that no one has asked me what my love language is.
What is your love language?
No, I'm not answering. And let's move on.
I want to know what
She wants compliments?
I don't want compliments.
You want gifts. Gifts.
I don't want gifts. No.
Acts of service?
But hold on, she doesn't want gifts, but when I bought her a jumpsuit, it was the best thing she's ever gotten.
It was the best. That was literally the best gift. I mean, it was very, very special. It's very snazzy.
So wait, what is it? I gotta know now.
I'm a physical touch person, which I think a lot of people are surprised to know. I'm a physical touch person. I'm a quality time person. And
those are my two.
Yeah. Look at us.
Dang.
Yeah. I mean, acts of service are definitely important. And my last boyfriend was a carpenter, which was really amazing and beautiful. And he was a wonderful artist. And there was a lot of acts of service in there, which I think was his love language. Not so much mine. That's a different story. And to me, words of affirmation, that is important to me, but not actually in the form of like a traditional compliment. Mm-hmm. Jonathan is a writer and a poet. And that's like my favorite. He's not. He shakes his head and says no, but that's like one of my favorite things. Like every note that he writes, like even just like a little note, I really cherish it, like everything about it.
You know, it's so interesting though, is because we had the author on our podcast with my sister and
What?
I.
You're so fancy.
We're fancy.
Wow.
But here, I didn't realize that he had other books, and he has the 5 love languages for children.
Stop.
And that's
amazing.
It's amazing. And I never even thought about it because I love my kids the same way physically. And my oldest is a little squirmy and he's a little sensitive touch-wise. And I'm like, oh my God, that's not his love language. So I've been shifting
Oh
a
my
little
gosh.
bit.
Okay, that's amazing you said that because I'm a mom of 2 boys and I'm a divorced mom, which means I'm in my house, with these humans. And I tend to be a very boyish female, meaning like I'm the one who wrestles with them. Like we talk about sports cars, like I'm more into sports, I think, than my children. And these are all completely like gendered. Like I totally get these are like broad strokes of like boys, girls. But one of the things that I realized is like when they were little and they would get upset, I wanted to talk it out with them and like hold them because like, oh, you got your feelings hurt. Like, let's talk about it. And oh my goodness, so grateful that I'm in therapy to be able to process because what I needed was to know I was making them feel better because they were in pain. And what they needed, they would like to go to a little cave, just like that book said, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from... My younger one, literally, we had a little room. We have a room under the stairs. It's just like Harry Potter. We turned it into his little space. And he had a little milk crate, and we put up all his things that he liked, and he took his favorite babies in there and all his favorite things. He wanted to go there when he was upset. And I'd be like waiting, and at first I was like white-knuckling it, like, when's he going to come out and talk about his feelings? And then I realized, like, it was learning that they are allowed to process. And I felt where, like, the female in me was like, talk, come on. Like and I've done that with men my whole life. And like, that's not how they processed. And even now that I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old, like when he's upset, he said that even when I acknowledge he's crying, it makes him self-conscious. Like if he gets upset, like if he wells up, he's like, don't. He literally said, don't do what your mom sometimes does to me when I feel sad. And I was like, oh, geez. But anyway, I'm totally gonna that's what I'm gonna do this evening when I get my kids back. I'm totally gonna think about this in the sense that they want quality time. They want me with them off my phone. And they also want me to sit while they're on their phone, right? Like just be present, mama. Like they want me to hear what on TikTok they thought was funny. Like, oh, here's this meme. It's kind of funny, Miles.
Well, it's really it's fascinating because it's so true. I mean, we project onto our children. But it's like, wait a minute, you are a different human being than I am. I need to act accordingly, love accordingly.
Something that in previous generations, many parents did not realize, and even out of love, especially, just going to say it, especially, families from at least, where I come from, that kind of post-Holocaust, like, I will hold you so close that they will never separate us. And it's that psychological notion of I don't know where I end and you begin. I think that's true for a lot of families. And it's not that it's done to try and hurt you. It's done out of love, but it's that death grip of love.
It's so shocking that men have closeness issues and want a little bit of space.
You know what? You can have your space. You can take your space.
But it's so interesting, though. You talk about your 15-year-old who's crying and doesn't want to be seen. I dealt with that last night where my son was like crying on FaceTime and he was not showing me his face. And I'm like, let me see you. And he's like, no. But, again, just going back to my experience and finding and being more vulnerable after the Hoffman experience, it changed everything for me as a man to be able to express myself to my mother.
That's incredible.
Write her the things that I wanted to do. My relationship with my wife, we've been together for 20 years. It took off to another place. And I will say this sex was always good. It went to another level. I got connected. It was so connected.
Was that okay? So I want to know, do you think that was the vulnerability you were able to have, the closeness? I mean, was it understanding her better?
Yeah, it was just opening my entire being up to her and expressing to her how I feel about her.
And like we say, foreplay is everything that happens in between sex for women.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And is this the podcast where you launch your training sessions for men to achieve this vulnerability and better sex in their life?
This is good. And as long as it's under the mask of better sex, then we can get everyone in and just...
Men will be crying. They'll be sharing their feelings.
Yep.
They'll barely be able to have sex. They'll be so exhausted from sharing their feelings.
Right. Exactly. They'll need a nap.
Oliver Hudson, you are a delight, and it's so fun to meet people who like want to talk like us and think like us and just have a great time talking about deep things. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
I love this. And you guys are doing really cool stuff. I really love what you're doing. I think it's extremely important.
Thank you.
In this context, because it's not weighty, but we're still talking about it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I have two questions before we leave. They're both hopefully funny. One is, can I sign my children up for Hoffman right now? Do they accept tweens and teens? And the other thing I was going to say is, you're my favorite person in your family.
Oh, good. Finally, I got one. I got one on my team.
You know what I want to do, Mayim?
Go to the Hoffman Institute? Okay.
No, I want to go to family therapy with all the Hudsons. Me, you, Goldie, Kate.
That's a reality show.
That's a good podcast.
That would be a great podcast.
You were talking about how men, in previous generations didn't cook, didn't do anything.
I know someone's going to be like, my dad cooked. Okay, but mine didn't. So that's why I told that story.
Well, it's changed a lot now, the expectations. But my father was left alone for a series of months while my mother took my brother down to a special therapy in New York. And he was cooking for himself for the very first time, really, in his adult life, because my mom did most of the cooking. And so after a series of months, what was happening is he kept saying he was bored of food, because every night he would cook himself. He would barbecue chicken, put a baked potato in the toaster oven, and make broccoli. And the man for weeks and weeks just was eating the same thing.
You know what? It's all the food groups right there. He covered it.
Anyway, so I ended up coming back to the house and I took over cooking for him. And he started eating again. He started liking life. He was so enthusiastic about things all of a sudden. He couldn't understand why he was starting to get so depressed.
That's amazing. And then would he eat the cold chicken for breakfast?
I don't know. Breakfast was toast, I think. That he could do for himself.
Anyway, Oliver Hudson was I was nervous because he comes from such a Hollywood family and all this stuff and public and this, that, the other. But I really enjoyed speaking to him.
I mean, I have hair envy. Also, what podcast have we done so far that you haven't been nervous for?
You're noticing a pattern?
I'm just saying, we talked a lot about discovering patterns, identifying patterns. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I'm maybe noticing some similarities.
Yes, I am anxious all the time. I mean, if you were thinking that I don't know that I'm anxious all the time and that every episode is how's this going to go? What am I going to say that's stupid? Yeah, I know that happens all the time.
There's only been one episode where you literally melted and were underneath your chair.
What, the Glennon Doyle?
Yeah. Why don't we do an Ask Mayim Anything?
Okay.
Ask Mayim anything. Yeah.
Hi, Mayim. My name's Elizabeth. I've been listening to your podcast. I really enjoy it. I find it very helpful as somebody who also suffers from anxiety. But I would like to hear more about guilt, and particularly the way guilt affects us women, because it seems to affect us more than men. And I'm just curious if there's a reason for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to do something so obnoxious and say to you that you don't suffer from anxiety, you live with anxiety, and you thrive with anxiety. Just a little shift in perspective, how I like to see it. Guilt's kind of one of those amorphous words, and it sometimes gets misused. I'm not saying you're misusing guilt. I'm just saying that it is one of those words that can kind of get thrown around. We think about mom guilt. And there can be dad guilt, but that's specifically, because you're asking specifically about women, that's kind of one of the first things I think of. I think of people talk about mom guilt, that when men go back to work, what I often hear from male friends is after having a kid or whatever, it's they went back to work. They go to work and they have a good day and then they come home and they hang out with the kid. And when women go to work, it's often not like that. And a lot of women go to work and feel a lot of rumination and worry. And the reason for that is, for the most part, again, I'm speaking as someone who studied neuroendocrinology, women are hormonally primed to have a different set of attachment behaviors surrounding a mammalian infant. And that often will be reflected in that notion of guilt of going back to work or being away from the child. There are women who don't feel that at all. Doesn't mean they're not good moms. Doesn't mean they don't have good attachment with their kids. There are women who don't experience that. And there are men for whom going back to work is incredibly troublesome and they feel a tremendous amount of guilt. So I'm just going to kind of say that. But guilt is something that indicates that you've done something wrong and you feel bad about it, or that you feel conflicted about something and the easiest way to cope with it is to make yourself feel bad because the feelings surrounding how to manage that discomfort are unmanageable. Does that make sense, Jonathan, when I talk about guilt like that? And the reason that, again, generally speaking, statistically speaking, women may experience guilt more or differently than men is because of our unique position as female mammals, meaning the set of hormones that we have, the XX chromosomes that we have as opposed to an XY, those things design us for a life that was programmed not for sitting behind desks and going to work and looking at skyscrapers and things like that. That DNA and all of evolution was designed for us to be mammals. And Homo sapiens have a very specific placement as mammals, and we build skyscrapers and we have desks and we do all these things. But that doesn't change our anatomy and our physiology. And it doesn't change the fact that we are wired to have a tremendous amount of relational complexity. We care a lot and should about people. We do tend to be more social and have more linguistic complexity in our relationships. And those things in our culture often look like guilt. So I hope that's helpful. You know, the notion of working on yourself to be more forgiving of yourself is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself in terms of reducing guilt. And also knowing that it's completely normal to feel guilt if you're doing something that doesn't feel right. But oftentimes it's really just that conflict about, for example, wanting to be in two places at once and not being able to, which produces what we call guilt, but is actually a much more complicated human emotion.
Thank you so much for submitting the question. And if you're listening and have a question for Mayim, please go to bialikbreakdown.com. That's BIALIK. Breakdown.com, where you can ask Mayim anything. There's a form. You can submit text, you can submit audio, you can submit video. And thank you so much to everyone who has submitted a question. They are phenomenal, and we are going to try and continue to get to them.
Yeah, we're really enjoying connecting with our listeners this way.
If you're listening to the audio version, please subscribe, give us a 5-star review, share it with a friend. It helps us make more.
If you want to check us out in the flesh, go to my YouTube channel and also check out Sibling Revelry. And so grateful to Oliver Hudson for being with us today. From my breakdown to the one I hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or